Hey guys, it's Nick. Before we get going today, I wanted to give you a few discount codes for the products we love and our show sponsors. So don't just turn this one off. If you're listening to this podcast, we at Hardwick Life want to reward you for your loyalty. So take 25% off of your order by using the code HardwickFF25, because after this long, we consider you friends and family. That's HardwickFF25 at hardwick.life. It's like hardwick.com, but that one was taken by a shirt company. So hardwick.life is where you can find it. For 20% off at bubsnaturals.com, use the code Hardwick20. That's Hardwick20 at bubsnaturals.com. And for 10% off at Julian Bakery, use the code Nick Hardwick, that's me, at julianbakery.com. Again, Nick Hardwick at julianbakery.com. Now, if you want to hear what I take daily and get some insight as to what you should take, maybe, stay tuned. If not, skip ahead about a minute and we will be into the show. Thank you all. All right. So you want to know what you should buy. I take 6 of our Hardwick Life products every day. I originally started that company out of kind of selfish needs. I wanted to get access to the absolute highest grade products in the world. Our supplements are pharmaceutical grade, all of them. They've got unique delivery mechanisms. So you aren't just getting expensive urine, you're actually absorbing the products at a higher rate than cheaper store-bought supplements. I take brain, joint, fuel, phyto, pump, and neuro. Now, that may be a little extreme for you, but those are my jams. Now, I've done a lot of damage to my body. I need all of them. The brain and joint, they're kind of self-explanatory, right? Fuel is one of the only whey protein powders that I can take that doesn't upset my tummy. And we hear the same thing quite frequently from folks that don't process dairy all that well. That's because it's made from New Zealand grass-fed whey. New Zealand has the highest dairy standards in the world. There's a noticeable difference, and the flavor, it's pretty damn incredible. For a peri-workout drink, which peri-workout, you'll hear that term, it means around your workout, or to add protein midday, I put 2 scoops of fuel with pump, which has 3 grams of creatine per serving, 400 milligrams of ATP, which is the body's energy currency, and 95 milligrams of caffeine to get you all fired up. All of those, they allow you to do more work in the gym, getting better results. More work equals better results. Who would have thought? Seriously, you can work harder and have a lower rate of perceived exertion. And I like to add in phyto, which has all of the necessary nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, along with this patented formula called True Brock, which contains glucoraphanin, which researchers at MIT are calling the fountain of youth. And lastly, I take neuro about an hour before bed. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a Stanford neuroscientist, host of the Huberman Lab podcast and recent guest with Joe Rogan. I'm sure some of you listen to that guy. He's pretty awesome. Recommended in our 3rd episode ever, we got him before he blew up, magnesium L-threonate, as it's the only form of magnesium to cross the blood-brain barrier. And it increases levels of brain magnesium, and that leads to better cognition and a more robust memory. That's important. It also has a slight sedative effect to help you get to sleep. All right, I'm not going to bore you with more details. Get over to Hardwick Life and use the code HardwickFF25 for 25% off. Now, you guys that have been following me for a while now know that I've used Bubs Naturals since the company's inception. I don't know. I may be their first ever ambassador. I know there's a lot of bigger names now that are promoting Bubs. The company is blown up and is thriving because many folks like me understand how great their product is. I take 2 scoops of their collagen protein and 1 scoop of the MCT oil powder daily with my morning coffee. Try it once, you're going to be hooked. It's unbelievably creamy. The collagen is also really a great way to sneak some protein into your kids' lives too. It's unflavored, so you can add it into pancakes, oatmeal, mac and cheese, or juice, and they're not going to notice a thing. Use the code Hardwick20 for 20% off. Lastly, before we get to the show, I want to tell you about my friends at Julian Bakery. This company, they've really got their act together. I believe most people could use more protein in their lives. It's got a very positive effect on satiety, brain signaling, and maintaining a healthy body weight. I recommend 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Please don't listen to Zac Efron's trainer, who on their show falsely ties too much protein to kidney failure and loss of bone density. And certainly don't go to the Game Changers propaganda documentary on Netflix for your science. Neither of these use actual science. There's a lot of kooks out there, folks. We're going to keep fighting the good fight. I love a variety of protein. Obviously, I've told you about our whey protein, Bubs Collagen Protein, and Julian Bakery's specialty, in my opinion, is their egg white protein powder. They come in ridiculous flavors like pumpkin pie, coconut, maple glazed donut. They blend easily. They're a great addition in the middle of the day. Use the code Nick Hardwick for 10% off. That's Nick Hardwick for 10% off. All right, that's enough. Let's get you back to the show. Love y'all. Hey guys, welcome into the Hardwick Life podcast. I'm your host, Nick Hardwick. Joining us today is a good friend of mine. His name is Nate Boyer. He's what many would deem a Renaissance man. The Army Green Beret is a philanthropist, a humanitarian, and a former football player for the Texas Longhorns. Hook 'em horns. Despite never playing a down of organized football prior to him going to the Special Forces. And later, he got to play for the Seattle Seahawks, becoming the oldest rookie in NFL history at age 34. He's both a member of the military as a veteran and an athlete community. He saw an opportunity to team up with both populations to take their transition struggles together through his charity, MVP, Merging Vets and Players. Boyer's belief that anything is possible has served him well throughout his life. It has made him especially fit to speak to find one's passions and living with purpose. Nate currently works in film and TV as a producer, director, actor, and a host. Among several other projects, he currently produces and hosts the NFL Network show Indivisible with Nate Boyer, which features NFL cities, players, and community leaders across America discussing issues relevant to their communities and how football unites us all to solve these problems. Nate really is an extraordinary guy. I got the chance to speak with him when I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with Chris Long's group, Waterboys, when they teamed up with Nate's Merging Vets and Players. And after those 2 weeks, it's super easy to see why Nate has had so much success in many different venues. He's thoughtful, kind, empathetic, but he's doggedly determined. He's ruggedly tough. He's a great leader. He's a really unique guy, and I can't wait to spend this time with him. Follow Nate on social media at Nate Boyer, Boyer 37 on Instagram. You can also book him to speak at your events at nateboyer.com. Here we go, guys. It's such an interesting thing, Nate, because I just had Sean Merriman on, and I asked him about his story, right? I played with him for quite a long time in San Diego, yet I didn't know his personal story, which is really interesting to be on a team with a guy, to be willing to do anything for him, put your neck on the line. You're willing to really, at the drop of a hat, I'm willing to fight for you. Yet we don't know anything about each other. And I think it's a really common alpha male trait that it's like, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. I'm not going to share anything because you may use that against me. But we find that as we transition out and we're kind of reflecting back and looking for, wherever we're going, we still have to make some reparations with the past. And part of that is becoming vulnerable to the experiences that we had, to each other. I just think it's super interesting that Sean and I got super vulnerable. I found out that he was homeless as a child. Wow. And I thought, man, that would have been super cool had I had known that when I was playing. And I think there's a lot of guys that stories I really would have liked to have known, because I probably would have went even further or worked even harder for them than I did, even as we were going as hard as we thought we could. I think there's always more juice in there. Talk about the vulnerability and how willing are guys to open up like that, and how long does it take?
Yeah, I think it's case by case, but that's a great example of, and I think oftentimes while you're playing, while you're involved in sports, almost maybe more college sports than pro sports as far as the locker room goes, where you get real close with those guys and you kind of learn their personal stories and all that. Yeah. I think there's definitely cases. I was fortunate. First of all, I was only in the NFL for about 5 months. But just there, I mean, to be up in Seattle with that team and the way that Pete Carroll kind of make sure that the locker room and the whole organization kind of has that
He's
college.
evolved. His coaching has evolved past what old school status quo was.
Yeah, which
Where
which
you
was old school status quo too, you know, when he was in with the Jets and the Pats and they didn't win. And and
right.
you know what I mean? And then he went to USC and obviously had a lot of success there. But I think he learned a lot from I mean, he changed philosophies as far as you know, becoming a lot much more of I think a patient person, someone that doesn't like for instance at practice, he's not big on coaches just berating people. He actually doesn't allow it.
Right.
If players screw up, especially at the pro level, they know, like they know, you know what I mean? And they also know that if they screw up enough, they're going to get cut. Like it's just that simple, or they're just not going to play. And so you don't need to like, you know, there's a different type of discipline.
That's right.
Or disciplining, I should say, that can come from these coaches. And that's just what he chose. You know, he's like, look, if there's going to be yelling and screaming in practice, it's going to be positive stuff. And when guys screw up, you know, you take them off to the side, be like, dude, like we're going to have to let you go, or we can't keep you if you can't get it right.
And you understand the agreement when you show up. It's
right,
just,
right.
And new psychology will tell you that if you berate a guy and you have him see red, there's a barrier put up in the brain that will say, I can't function. I'm in fight or flight. And now one mistake, that's why it turns into two, turns into three, is makes a mistake on the field, comes over, coach yells at him, sees red, can't think clearly, can't relax and get caught up in the moment again, still thinking about the past, not focused on right now or worried about the present. And so Pete, I think, has so much curiosity about psychology and how players and what makes them tick that it just seems like he's the ultimate optimist, and that he really fuels the fire by breathing positivity into it rather than taking the opposite side of that stance.
Totally. Yeah. And I don't think, I mean, I know from my own childhood playing sports that if I was ever out there, either trying to impress somebody like my dad, because I knew my dad was at the game, or out there trying not to make a mistake, like you're not going to perform. There's no freedom if you're not playing with a bit of freedom, you know, and which is fun. It's a lot more fun to play, you know, with that feeling of like, I got this. I hope my opponent throws something at me because this is just like, this is what it's all about. Like that feeling, I guess, when you're in the flow or whatever they call it.
That's right.
The opposite of that, when you're just like playing not to lose, like you're going to lose. You're going to screw up. You're probably going to get hurt. You know what I mean? So, and I think that was a lot of the reason too. It's just like, it's like, hey, I want my guys feeling free out there. And with that, it developed a different type of locker room culture, you know? And it was like, guys they're there to help each other. They also give each other shit and do all the things we're supposed to do in the locker room. But the brotherhood kind of naturally forms. And the same thing I noticed when I was at Texas, because I remember people saying, oh, college and the pro, like it's totally different. Like it's a business up there. It's not as fun. It's like you kind of come in and punch the clock, and, you know, it's still football, which is cool, but it's not, you're going to miss all the stuff from college. And like I said, I was only up there 5 months. So I don't have a ton of experience to speak on. And the Seahawks were really good. They've been to back-to-back Super Bowls. So that always helps, I think, a locker room.
Winning cures everything.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when the staff's not all puckered, you know, all the time.
That's right.
But still, it wasn't that different to me. You know, it was a little bit different, but it wasn't that different. The main difference was just like, oh, this is just an older group of guys versus, you know, 19 to 22-year-olds in college. Now they're, you know, 22 to 32 or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so like, and then the military, it's very exactly the same. I mean, as far as the locker room, we never compare, you know, combat to playing football. But I mean, you know, when we did Kilimanjaro, and I'm sure you know from other experiences as well, but going out to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, we were only out there for 10 days, you know, spending time with half a dozen or so vets and half a dozen or so NFL players. And like, we gel like so quickly, and we just kind of get each other. And, you know, we have as like a shared experience in the sense of knowing that we're not quitters. We're the type of people that are willing to sacrifice a lot to be elite, different types of sacrifice, sure, but still that same mentality. And most of the players, NFL players that I've come across that I've kind of gravitated toward to become good buddies with over the years, regardless of socioeconomic background, skin color, religious beliefs, any of that stuff. Like there's certain guys that I'm just like, and there's a good amount of them that I was like, you guys you would crush it as a Green Beret. Like I have no doubt
Yeah.
you'd be fine. You know what I mean? I mean, it's going to be hard or whatever. And then there's a lot on the flip of that. There's a lot of guys that serve in the military, and maybe there's a bit of a athletic hurdle there because it does take a certain amount to play, especially at the NFL level and a lot of these pro sports. Like there's a certain amount of I think a gift you need to be endowed with, talent wise and whatever. But at the same time, and I'm sure you played with tons of these guys that were not the best gifted wise. They didn't they weren't the fastest, they weren't the strongest, they weren't the biggest, but like they just outworked everybody. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, he just outworked everybody, and just your day eventually came. I'm out here in Dallas right now, and I was just hanging with a guy named Romby Bryant, who I don't know if you've ever heard of Romby. He only played in the league for 4 years. He was with Baltimore and Atlanta, and then he played in Canada for 7 or 8, a receiver.
Wow, yeah.
And he had no scholarship offers and walked on to like Northeast Oklahoma, community college or whatever.
Directional school, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like walked on, made the team, started at receiver, and then after his sophomore year, Tulsa offered him a scholarship, still a small school, and so he transferred to Tulsa and played receiver there, and then he made it to the league, and played 4 years, which is pretty incredible. And there's a million of those stories where it's like, the guy wasn't LeBron in high school, you know what I mean? Like he just
plenty, yeah. He just kept working, and there is this war of attrition that goes on that if you can just stick with it, be resilient, not shut down, keep finding ways to improve, then eventually everyone else just kind of goes, maybe it's not my path. Maybe that's, and you continue to forge forward.
Let everybody else quit. That's what I do.
Just let everybody else quit. They'll fall off. As long as you can stick with it, it's awesome. So talking about Romby and you and me, and I just had a guy on a couple of weeks ago who was a walk-on, didn't play high school football past his freshman year. I didn't play high school football past my freshman year. Everyone's got this crazy story. It's not just like, oh, wow, there's one guy on a team who's got a crazy story. Everybody's story is pretty damn wild of how they ended up making it. And some of it seems like serendipity, and some of it's just brute force and effort. And there has to be both of that, I feel like. But you didn't play organized football at all, like, period. That's
no.
And then that's crazy. And then you became the oldest rookie ever in the NFL at 34 after a career as a Green Beret, going back to school at the University of Texas. Take me back through your journey from a younger kid to the Army to Texas. How the hell did this all happen?
Well, first of all, I was a long snapper, so you're not really a football player if you're a long snapper, you know what I mean?
I don't know if I'd want that pressure. And I tell you what, I can't spin a ball.
There you go. Okay. Well, I'll take that.
I can't spin a ball.
It's different. It's a specialty, special skill. It's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, so growing up, I played a lot of sports. Started out with soccer when I was probably, I don't know, 5-6 years old. And then I started playing, baseball, and then I started playing basketball, and I kind of got into all of them. I'm a huge sports nut. When I was a little kid, like 3-4 years old, I would watch entire baseball games. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I was San Francisco Giants, 49ers, Golden State Warriors, San Jose Sharks back in the day. Like, cool. I don't really watch all hockey anymore, but like that was my stuff. I love Notre Dame because Joe Montana went to Notre Dame, and Tim Brown, who was also eventually became a sports guy, but went to Notre Dame, and like those, and they were on TV all the time. So I would just watch games, entire games. I mean, a regular season baseball game,
for a 4-year-old,
yeah, on TV, not at the game. You know what I mean? Like impressive.
It
It's
is.
also kind of depressing and like, what's wrong with this kid? You know what I mean?
I think it means you've got great attention span.
Yeah, I don't know if I guess I do with certain things. If I'm into it, I do. You're right.
Yeah.
If I'm not, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, because in school, not
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 necessarily your gig.
the span. Yeah, but so I'd sit there. I just remember sitting there watching games. Like I would memorize the batting average of every player on the Giants, and I could still tell you today, not the batting average, but I could tell you today, like the batting order, name, their uniform number of the starting nine of the Giants, because I just watched it so much. It's ingrained in my memory forever. And some of those guys probably only played a handful of years and were just average, but to me, they were all just like these, they're legends. They're like they should all be in the Hall of Fame in my mind. And so, yeah, I was like so into sports, and I loved football too. Football was actually my favorite. Became my, I should not right away, became my favorite to watch when I was probably 5, 6 years old. The 49ers didn't hurt that in the 80s. They were, a dynasty. They won 4 Super
Pretty
Bowls.
awesome.
It's another one in the early 90s, and they just had from Joe Montana and Steve Young to Ronnie Lott, Jerry Rice, Roger Craig, Randy Cross, Bill Romanowski, Charles Haley. They just endless legends. And
Dion at the end.
that's right, Dion at the
Yeah.
end. Yeah, I mean it was
Ricky
great.
Waters.
Ricky Waters, Tom Rathman. What about Tom Rathman?
Oh yeah, God, those are fun.
Yeah, obviously, gosh, R.I.P. Dwight Clark, and then
Yeah.
Brent Jones. Like it's just
Steve
yeah.
Young.
And I got it's a really cool thing for me is over the last 5 years getting to meet some of these guys, and
Fun.
yeah, it was awesome. But so football was my favorite. And like I said, I was a big Notre Dame fan. I watched Notre Dame on Saturday and the Niners on Sunday every week. And but when I was really young, I know I expressed some interest in playing, and my mom wasn't super hot about it because my dad played high school football, wrestled. He's from Oregon, and and I think he had some not major injuries, but he had some injuries. I mean, he played football, he had some injuries,
Yeah.
and also just the idea of the sport. It is a violent sport. She was like, you can play when you're a little bit older. I was also kind of small. I was a bit of a late bloomer. So, um, and so as things went on, I got so sucked into those other sports, which I loved, especially baseball and basketball. I was actually pretty good at baseball. I was okay at basketball, but basketball I liked more, probably because I wasn't as good at it. I tend to gravitate towards things that I
Isn't that
really
funny?
enjoy, but I'm not great at. I want to get better. And so I by the time I remember being like 8th grade and kind of thinking about it again, like, oh, I should play football. And then I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I might lose my starting spot in baseball or basketball if I focus on something else. And how horrible would it be if I went out for the football team and I didn't make it, and then I'm just like riding the bench? Like, I don't want to do that. That sounds horrible. So I just didn't play. And over time throughout high school and then beyond high school, I like regretted it. It really ate at me because it became more and more over the years my favorite sport. And I was like, man, I can't believe I never played. Like, why would you not, why would you not play do your favorite thing? And it's too late now. And so then I graduated high school. I moved to San Diego for a bit and worked on a fishing boat. And then eventually up to Los Angeles because I was interested in film and television, something that I've circled back on now and we can talk about later. But and I was living in LA and trying to figure out how I was going to work in this industry. And I took some acting classes and I enjoyed that, but I also was like, man, I want to really learn how to make films and whatever. Well, then 9/11 happens and completely derails that plan. It wasn't much of a plan, I'll be honest. I just was kind of up there partying a lot and hoping that something was going to fall in my lap, which is it's not the way that life works.
Right.
So
But
then
you
I
were
went to the
young.
military. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Then I went into the military and did 5 years of active duty. It was on the heels of a trip that I'd made out to the Darfur to do some relief work amidst the genocide there. And I was there for a couple months and on the border of Sudan and Chad, and completely changed my life. It was like I was interested in the military, and I knew I wanted to do something away from Los Angeles was kind of weighing heavy on me at the time. I mean, in my early 20s, but I just didn't feel purposeful. A lot of my friends were graduating college and starting their lives in a lot of ways, and I just felt like I hadn't even began. And
Who
I
was
was
that
over.
group? In Darfur. Who was that with?
I actually kind of just went by myself. I ended
Oh,
up,
cool.
yeah, I applied to and called like Doctors Without Borders and Catholic Relief Services and Child Fund and all these organizations to try and volunteer. And because I didn't have a college degree, also, it was a war zone essentially. So it was a very dangerous place. They were kind of limiting the people they were allowing in. But I'm also like reading about how they were way understaffed and needed help, just expanding the refugee camps that were being that were overflowed. Um, I mean, there had been like 300,000 people already murdered in this region. And I was just like, in the moment, being a very idealistic, young man that didn't feel super purposeful either. Like, what am I doing to help anybody else in the world? I didn't really feel like I was doing anything that made much of a difference. Like if I wasn't around, the world would be just fine, keep spinning the same way. I mean, yeah, my family will miss me and whatever, but what's the, yeah, what am I doing here? Um, so I just kind of made the commitment to go out there and I bought a ticket at AAA in Burbank, and then got a visa. Applied for a visa through the consulate, and they got it like 2 weeks later. And I just jumped on a plane and flew out there. And once I got on the ground, I just kind of talked my way into an opportunity to volunteer, an opportunity to
But
serve.
had nothing set before you even went over there. Just
No.
landed and said, "Let's go make this happen."
It was
That's
it was
awesome.
it was yeah, it was awesome. It was very
That's
stupid
awesome.
and not safe. But it was awesome. It was exactly what I
It's all
needed
right.
to do. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It was like I think just to the accomplishment, that feeling of like I had a goal, I had an idea, this is what I wanted to do, this is how I wanted to help. And I just made it happen on my own terms when other people were telling me, you can't do this, it's impossible. Like it just doesn't work like that. And I'm like, why not? I'm helping. I don't want anything back except the opportunity to help, to serve and spend my time. And, at the time I was like, well, if I don't come back, that's on me. Like, I'm not worried about it. Um, and I know I put my mom through hell in that situation, but I've put her through hell plenty of other times, so she's used to it. But
She
yeah,
became numb to that.
yeah, she's super numb to that. So yeah, I mean, but just the 2 months I spent there completely changed my life. It was, and it was the people. They were so generous. Like no one would take a dime from me. I mean, you've probably been many other places as well, but like our time in Tanzania, those people, they're so gracious, and they just want to spend time with you. And it's sort of where I gained my patriotism, because they were very grateful that an American would leave the opportunity that we have here to go help over there. They thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so many of those people would give anything to spend a day here,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, the reality is that they probably won't have that opportunity, but hopefully we can help and provide them with at least some semblance of that. And yeah, so I did that. It completely changed me and helped me grow in so many ways. And I just knew coming back, before I came back to the States, that like I need to continue to do something like this. I just didn't know what that thing was. And my last week there, I got malaria, and the family that put me up was like taking care of me. They put this little radio next to my bed, um, and there was a Bob Marley tape in the cassette player. So I'm listening to Bob Marley, flipping the tape over like 3 times each. And at that point, I'm just like sick of Bob Marley as much as he's a legend.
Enough.
Yeah, I
Right.
was like, enough, man. So I start trying to find something on the stations, and there's no stations coming in. It's just all static, except for one. There's one that came through, and it was the BBC News. And so I'm listening to the BBC radio, and like the second battle of Fallujah is going on at that time. And there's like a play-by-play of what's happening out there. And I'm just listening to these guys, when I say guys, I mean the Marines that were over there.
Right.
Um, that were essentially fighting for those that can't fight for themselves, and doing what they could. And everybody's got their different opinions on what's right, wrong, politically when it comes to war. And I respect that completely. But just the idea that they were willing to volunteer and go fight for something, especially other people in a foreign place, was inspiring to me. And I kind of just made the decision right there, when I come back, I'm going to join the military, and didn't really know what branch or what I'd be doing, but I made the decision there before I flew back to the States.
And then from the time that you joined the Army, when did you realize I'm not just going to be in the Army, I want to be in the elite of the Army?
Actually, before, so I flew back, went up to visited my grandparents for a couple of weeks, just kind of decompress. And I didn't really want to be back in LA, or I just didn't want to be in California. I kind of wanted to be away from people. And my grandparents they're passed away now, but they lived in Southern Oregon in this little house, kind of out on the river. And it's where my dad grew up, and so that was
Very
nice. I
cool.
kind of went up there and spent a couple of weeks, and I actually met with recruiters up there just to learn about it. It's one of those times. I mean, this is 2004. Of course, we have the internet and all that, but it was just different. We didn't have smartphones, first of all, but it was a lot more the way I learned and um, learned about situations and what was going on in the world was at the library. and and
What is that?
yeah, exactly. What is that? I need to go in
Do
one.
they have those?
Yeah, they must, right? They must still be around. Um, and then the library, and then just going and talking to people. So I went in and met with the Marine recruiter actually first, because of what the Marines, that's what I'd been listening to over there. It seemed to make sense, and I was just kind of hearing about the jobs and reading about it, and nothing really struck me. And then once I found out about the Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, I was like, oh wow, like their motto is De Oppresso Libere, which means to free the oppressed. There's like a humanitarian side of that mission. We're doing foreign internal defense, which essentially is working alongside indigenous people, fighting alongside them as well, and trying to like build up their military, train them, train, advise, assist, as we are at the same time, still conducting uh, like unilateral and bilateral operations, often going after high level targets, basically trying to,
Yeah.
yeah, you're going after the bad guys and doing all that stuff, but at the same time, you're trying to help the people that live there, and you're doing it with them hand in hand. So to me, that felt like it made more sense. That was like, I mean, they're going to know what they want in this, the area they're living in, and how we can best help. But at the same time, we're still fighting to using our resources to better their quality of life and give them an opportunity, give them a chance. So it just kind of made sense. I didn't realize how, you talked about attrition later, I didn't realize how high the attrition rates were for that. I knew it was going to be tough. I didn't know it was going to be as tough as it was. And I was fortunate that
Do
at
you know
that
what they
time,
are? Do you know what the attrition rates are?
I don't offhand. I know. So like I'll give you an example of numbers from my class. So the way that when I joined, there was this thing, I don't even know if they still have it. It was called the 18 X-ray program. And so you came in off the street. If you came in off the street, so not somebody that's already in the regular Army, and you passed all these tests, right? There was like a psych eval, language aptitude test, also the standard ASVAB. You had to score a certain level on that. Um, you physical exams, all kinds of stuff like that. They like make sure that you qualify. Then you have to apply for this contract, and it's almost like applying for, not like a college. I mean, it's not like that, but but you have to apply for this thing. Put your packet in, and then they let you know, hey, we got you a slot in this in this SF pipeline, and you basically, you go to basic training, and then you go to airborne school, and then you go to a pre-selection course that only guys like you go through, other 18 X-rays, which is really hard. It's about 5 weeks long. And then if you make it through that, then you get to go to regular selection with the rest of the regular Army guys. And I think the regular selection classes, I would say the attrition rate is probably, I mean, I feel like we had a class of, maybe 300 and something, and like 100 and something made it. So maybe maybe 40% on the high end get through just the selection portion. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But there was plenty
Right.
of guys before that already dropped out, as I was getting to that point. And then there was guys there's a year long of training after selection with a lot of people that don't make it through that. So I would guess on average from somebody who's already in the conventional army, it's probably 20% make it through
Yeah.
that they get a selection slot. But like from my class of basic training, in my basic training battalion, it was all 18 X-rays. They put us all in one class, in one group. So I think there was like, I want to say there was like 140 of us or something like that, roughly. And that had this 18 X-ray contract. And I think we did the math one day, like me and my buddies, and trying to figure out who made it. I think 11 of us made it through. So by those numbers, that's less than 10%. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
Wow.
it's tough. I mean, there's an old
Super tough.
song about the Green Berets, the Ballad of the Green Berets. And in the song, it's an older song. And in the song, there's a stanza that says, 100 men will test today, but only 3 wear the Green Beret. So, people have said in the past, oh yeah, only like 3% of them make it through. I think it's a lot higher now. Maybe that may have been true around, Vietnam era when that song was written, and
Right.
the Green Beret was a new thing. But
And
it's
it may
still,
be higher too, because like I know the Navy SEALs, they worked on finding better qualified people to even come to the selection process. So they wanted numbers to grow, but they wanted it to remain as challenging as it was. So they had to get better qualified individuals to even show up at the door.
that makes
So
sense.
I would imagine there's part of that, where back in the day when the song was written, they were probably like, come one, come all, let's see if you can make it.
That's a good point. That's actually a really good point. Yeah, you want better candidates without having to lower the standards, basically.
Yes.
And that's
Well,
been a
that's great.
battle recently that people are very vocal about in the SF community, like worrying about the standards being dropped, and it's
Oh yeah.
understandable. Like, yeah, you want to make sure that you're operating at optimal level, and you've got as many that make sense, in those jobs. But at the same time, like just scaling something for the sake of scaling something, especially like that, is not a good idea.
I would imagine too, there's quite the challenge as we watch. It's really easy to see and follow with professional football and professional sports, the changing dynamic of the individual and the changing needs of the individual. And war is such a different beast, where in football we can say, yeah, well, it's just football, right? So we can talk about our feelings a little bit more, and we can be more vulnerable, and you can have a bigger voice. But when it comes to the military, I would imagine there's an old guard that goes, no, we can't do all of that and still do what we're trying to do. So I would wonder if that's a challenge when people are talking about we're growing too quickly, we're scaling too quickly, we don't have this many qualified people, if that maybe is something that they're alluding to, as well as the changing dynamic of the new younger generation that's coming in, and they're raised different. They have different
Right.
priorities and values.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, there's eh, eh, what am I trying to say here? We've all got different come from different places, and have different experiences that kind of lead us to, these moments and all that. But and I think that the way too that the special operations community has evolved in what they do and how they do it is just changed quite a bit. So it is sort of enticing a different type of warrior from the past, not always, but I think somewhat. Technology has changed, but yeah, just also the way that we conduct things. And the thing about this war, which has been a very different one than we've ever experienced in our history, as America. I mean, it'll be 20 years on 9/11. I think Biden's announced on the day on 9/11 of 2021, which is exactly 20 years after we were attacked, will be the day that the last day of us being in Afghanistan, for instance.
Wow.
Um, it's just like a totally different experience. I mean, maybe somewhat. there's some similarities, and I'm going to probably get crucified for saying this, to Vietnam, in the sense of like, we were trying to fight alongside Vietnamese people against the Viet Cong, trying to fight communism. And in this case, it's like we're fighting alongside the people of Afghanistan, the people of Iraq, against their oppressors. And it's like it was never easy, because it was never easily identified like who the enemy was. And when you look at things like World War I, World War II, Korea, even Revolutionary War, it was always very clear who the enemy was. I mean, I guess Civil War as well.
Very pointed mission.
Yeah, exactly. Like you were fighting
Very
against,
clear.
yeah, and especially when it's not. Maybe I won't group the Civil War, because that was on our own soil against, it was Americans against people that were Americans that were didn't want to be Americans anymore. Essentially, I know that's a whole ball of wax. I don't know if I want to go down that road.
Yeah,
but when World War II is a great example. It's like you're literally, you're fighting against the military of this country, military of Germany, the military of Japan, versus now it's like it was never that. It was never, we're going over there to fight against the Iraqi soldiers or the Afghan soldiers. That's not what we're doing. So the complication in that, and it just, it's a very nuanced look at everything. And I think it definitely, especially in the special operations community, it's sort of, it's very nuanced, like how you do everything. And you have to make sure that the people that you're, the candidates, that you're sort of going after and trying to train, understand that for the most part. And not all of them are great at it. I mean, there's shitbags in every industry. So, there's people that you
always
serve alongside.
Bottom third.
Yeah, exactly.
Bottom third of every team, that they're waiting for you to lose so they can suck that middle third right down with them.
Right. Exactly.
Every single time. All right. We talked about the changing dynamics in the NFL, and obviously one of the biggest moments that we can all look to, and we all will always look to historically in the NFL, is when you consulted Colin Kaepernick to take a knee in San Diego in the preseason of 2016. Side note, I was the color analyst up in the radio broadcast booth looking down, and we were all wondering how this was going to transpire. And you were a huge part of that. And you become a staple now in the NFL. What do you think about your message or approach, I guess, and how you've navigated that? How do you think that resonates, or why does that resonate so well with both, I think, football players and fans?
It was and is a very interesting time, in our nation's history. And there is a lot of change occurring. And at that time, specifically that week, it was a week before, I guess, the 15th anniversary of 9/11, or maybe a week and a half or so. We were in the midst of a presidential election, which we all know can be very divisive. Whether it
stirs up a lot of emotions.
Totally. Whether it was 2016, which it was then, or 2020, like this last year, it's just a lot when that stuff's going on. And also, Colin had been sitting on the bench in protest of police brutality, racial inequality, social injustice. And he had some very specific reasons as to why he was doing what he was doing. The media didn't do the best job of making that super clear, or at least making that the focus of why he was sitting. So the narrative quickly turned into, Colin Kaepernick isn't standing for the anthem. And then people kind of chose their own adventure there as to why, because he's anti-American, or he hates the military, or he, whatever it is. And, he did say things like, "I'm not going to stand for the flag of a country that oppresses Black people and people of color." But that was also in context to a much longer interview and conversation. The one that I always point people to is, I think, the first big one that he gave in a locker room, um, after it was identified that he'd been sitting during the anthem, because he'd done it for a couple of games. And it was like an 18-minute interview. And I believe that quote is in that interview, but he also says, he talks about his great respect for the military and the men and women in uniform and like all these other things that sort of made clear out the gate. But like people, they pick and peck and take whatever
Sound
is,
bites.
yeah, exactly. Whatever's going to get people fired up and stir emotions and sell advertising spots. And so that's what
That's the
happened.
game.
That's the
That's the
game.
game.
Cable news and whatever, no matter which side politically cable news is on, that's what they do. I mean,
Yes.
if you sit here and tell me that, the liberal cable news networks weren't bummed out that Trump didn't win again, at some level, I would say you're a liar, because I think that they thrived on that stuff. That's all, that's all you talk about all day. So not every,
Anger brings more out of people than positive news does. It's such a bizarre thing. So in sports talk radio in San Diego, when the Chargers would lose or when the Padres would lose, you get way more interaction than you do when the team wins. They're like, hey, cool, we win. Life goes on. When you lose, though, everyone's got an opinion and everyone gets angry or scared or whatever it is. And that incites action more than being happy.
right. Sadly, yes, totally.
Sadly, yeah, it does.
But it's the same thing with this. So, I was reached out to by a lot of those news networks from both sides of the political aisle, asking if I would come on and talk about Colin sitting on the bench, protesting, during the anthem, not protesting the anthem. And they're like, "Would you come on?" And I imagine they wanted me to probably take a very hard stance, an opinion. Then they'll bring on somebody else that thinks the opposite of me, and we'll just argue, about why he's right or why he's wrong, because that's good TV. And I didn't want to do that, so I respectfully declined. And I did agree to write an open letter through the Army Times, which very few people read normally. No offense, to all the military times. There's one for every branch, but I agreed to write that because I knew I was going to be able to write whatever I wanted, and they weren't going to, edit it too much or take things out of context or whatever. So I basically just wrote an open letter to Colin as if I had him in the room for 5 minutes, just to say, hey, this is how I feel. These are my experiences. This is why it hurts me to see that. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to pretend to understand why you're doing what you're doing and what you're going through, because I don't know what that experience is like. And at the end of the day, like, I took the oath to defend the Constitution, which includes the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and also, like in the military, de oppresso libera. The reason I joined, I mean, that should apply for all of my life. And if you feel oppressed, maybe, yeah, it's a different type of oppression from the Darfur or Iraq and Afghanistan, but it's still oppression. It's still, people feel like things aren't equal. Like, I want to work towards trying to make them feel the same way that I do, when the anthem is played. And I want to make or help I don't want to help everybody, feel that they've got an equal voice and an equal opportunity. So I kind of wrote that. It got submitted the next day, or not submitted, it ran the next day. And it went like crazy viral. I think mostly sports journalists shared it, which was cool.
Yes.
And that's where it really kind of got legs. And and then I was getting messages from like Lance Armstrong and all these like kind of random, not random, but just people involved in the sports world that were reading this thing and kind of hearing about this, and they're like, this is exactly how I feel. Like, I you know I I'm like in support of what he's, um of the mission, maybe not fully understanding why he chose that platform or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think that what you're saying, as far as like, uh, not making a judgment because of you see something is valuable. And Colin actually was inspired by it too. He read it and enjoyed it, and so he reached out, said he wanted to meet face to face down in San Diego. And I was a little concerned it was going to be like a publicity stunt or something like that. And he was like, no, there's no media. It's not going to be a media thing. And he's like, you got to talk to the coaches and make sure it's all right, because it's game day. And So I talked to Chip Kelly and Trent Baalke, who was the GM at the time, and just said, "Hey, Colin wants to meet. I mean, I know you guys are playing tomorrow, but I'm happy to come down there and, um, I can meet him at the hotel or whatever, and we can just kind of talk through things." And they were like, "Yeah, that'd be great." So I came down. We met in the lobby of the team hotel, actually, which is a pretty visible place.
Right.
And Colin had recently, I mean, he'd grown the hair out, so he had like the afro, and he's a big guy. He's like probably six
Oh
foot or
man.
so. He's a tall
He's
dude.
a specimen. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so we're sitting in this lobby, and there's like people. This is in Horton Plaza at uh, yeah. I think, is it the Westin there? I can't remember what hotel it was, but
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
we stayed there when we played in the Holiday Bowl, same hotel we stayed in at the Longhorns when I was in college. And so we, there's people walking by the window, like, kind of double taking, looking at
Like,
Colin.
hey, there's Colin. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because he was all over the news that week, for everything that had gone on. And so, yeah, we just talked about, um, our backgrounds and my time in the military. Talked about his life growing up and his time in college, and um, also he was just like, "Look, I got friends. I got one of my best friends is right down the road in Coronado. He's a SEAL, and I have friends and family in the law enforcement and all that." He's like, it's not that I think that all those people are just bad people or anything like that. Um, it's just the system needs to change. When officers are not being held accountable, for their actions. Like I mean, a great example of that recently is the Derek Chauvin thing. I mean, we may have had a very different verdict. We likely would have had a very different verdict, if this had happened in 2015, versus
Yeah.
2020.
That's right.
So, anyways, neither of us, well, especially me, had any idea what this would sort of evolve into. But in that conversation, I was like, for me, it more than anything, it just kind of hurts me to see someone, not stand when the anthem is played and when that flag is raised, because of the emotional attachment, personal attachment that I have to it as a service member, and but at the same time, like, you have a completely different relationship to those symbols, and I got to respect that, and over and since that time too, reading more, learning more about, um, for instance, the Star Spangled Banner, and some of the verses that we don't sing anymore because they are controversial, and there's a reason we only sing that first verse, and it's just very interesting, and something I hadn't, um, considered, and thought of, and to learn that from him and just have that conversation, and for him to, to hear stories of, people that I served with, that I'd share in messages with him from people that had sent me stuff about how, um, what those symbols mean to them and why. And, I carried my best friend's casket that was draped in an American flag. So, like, I'll always, when I see that thing, it just means something different to me, and that resonated with him too. So he's point blank asked me if there was another way I thought he could demonstrate that wouldn't offend people in the military, or protest that wouldn't offend people in the military. I told him, like, there's nothing you can do that's not going to offend some people. Um, and he said, like, because I'm committed to not standing until I see great change. And I told him that I respected that, and then he said, "So what do you think I should do?" And I said, "The only thing that makes sense to me, if you're not going to stand, that would show respect. I think, first of all, it's important that you're alongside your teammates, versus kind of on the bench, sit by yourself. Just
Removed. Yeah.
for me, it doesn't look super inspirational, but yeah, so I just suggested taking a knee. And he thought that was him. He was sitting there with Eric Reed actually at the time, and both of them thought that was, better, more powerful. And so he took a knee that night, and I stood next to him, and I think that the idea behind it for me was like, I knew I was going to get backlash, which I have, for suggesting something like that, but I mean, like I said, he committed to not standing. I can't make him do that. He doesn't
Right.
want to do it. I don't want someone to do something they don't want to do, or out of obligation. I don't want people standing for, you know, um, pledging allegiance to something that they don't believe in, unless they
Right.
actually believe it. And
Did it
people,
just come to you in the moment that
yeah,
when he
it
said,
did.
"Well, what can I do that would have a
Yeah,
better feel to it?" And you said, "Take
it
a
did.
knee." It just kind of
Yeah, because I didn't. didn't think he was going to ask me something like that. First of all, I had no clue that's where it was going to go. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just was trying to think of like, what's a gesture that just makes sense besides, I mean, there's not really a lot of options there. If he's going to
No.
be alongside his teammates, which I did kind of think that was going to be something important to express
Yes.
to him. What else can you do that's not standing, that doesn't look ridiculous? You know what I mean?
Yeah. What do all athletes do after practice? They take a knee
Yeah.
and defer to their coach.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I thought for me, it softened the blow to those who were looking on, ready to get inflamed.
Mhm.
And I thought it captured the essence of what he was going for. I thought coming up with his teammates and allowing them to be around him or him to be around them, I thought it just, because everything's not a zero sum game, right? It's not either or. We don't have to always play this either or game. You're either going to do this or you're going to do this. And it's on the opposite ends of the spectrum. That's just foolish choices, right? So it's like there's always a middle ground here. And I thought this was just an unbelievable moment. Are you guys still have a relationship?
No, I haven't talked to Colin in a couple of years now, but we did stay in touch for the rest of that season and into the next year. Um, and it just, he's got a lot going on,
Yeah.
and
And you do too.
yeah,
It's
and kind of
life.
different paths too. There's plenty of things that he's sort of said and stood for, and tweeted or whatever, that I don't agree with, and that's fine. Like, we don't have to agree on everything. We don't have to be on the exact same mission, and like our idea of what right looks like doesn't have to be totally aligned. But if he's doing things respectfully, and he's aiming to help people and aiming to find a way to fix a broken system. And to me, even though he may never admit this, or people may never see this as a reality, to me that's at least somewhat patriotic. So it means he cares about it. He cares about his country. And so, because if he was just like, damn, America is hopeless and whatever, then I don't think he would do anything, or he would just leave. So
Mhm.
um,
Yeah,
yeah,
you only coach
right.
somebody that you care about and that you see potential in. You're
Right.
only willing to put effort in if you really believe you can change. And by the way, good for you for being truly open-minded and seeing that as a form of patriotism, because I think people are open-minded to the point that you see the world the way that they see it.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's and in a lot of people's head that's being open-minded when it's not. You've never been in his shoes. You don't know what he goes through on a daily basis. You don't see the world through his lens and his experience. So you're incredibly open-minded, and I think that's awesome. Tell me, because you got so much going on, we're coming up on time. Tell
Yeah.
me about this docu-series you got going for the NFL Network,
Yeah.
Indivisible.
Yeah. Indivisible. We unfortunately weren't able to do it in 2020. We're hoping to jump back on in 2021, but we
Good.
did it the 2 years prior. And basically um it was an Anthony Bourdain type of show. Less food, more
The
football.
best. He's
Yeah.
the
Oh man.
best.
He's a legend.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. He was the
he's
best.
the best.
He's a legend. No one will ever be as good as to do it like he did. And I'm not even. It's like the weakest attempt ever, but I'm doing my best. But essentially,
You
like,
got your own thing going. You're good.
yeah, essentially the city is the main character, much like in his experience, the place, and we do it. We're doing it in NFL cities, and so we travel to this NFL city, and we learn about the history and the culture and the food that is a part of it, but also mainly how football has changed this place and continues to change this place. How it brings people together, and it's like you just learn through these people's stories, um, how this game has affected their way of life, has affected politics and social justice over the years, and continues to, and like how they do kind of play hand in hand. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, oh, keep politics out of sports and blah blah blah. But the reality is, on both sides of the spectrum, we talk about patriotism. I mean, we're playing the anthem before games. Like, politics and sports are intertwined. They always have been. And people like Muhammad Ali and Jackie Robinson and Billie Jean King, and like
Yeah.
there's just
Jesse
so
Owens. Yeah.
many athletes from all kinds of sports that have completely changed the way that we look at things, and maybe helped a segment of the country listen in a different way because of athletes. And football, there's no difference in the NFL. I mean, there's plenty of NFL players from the past and in the current times that they're doing a lot to change the way that we look at things.
So I can't wait to see this. If you tell me something's going to have the feel of Anthony Bourdain, and I love what you're talking about. The city's the character, food is a part of it, sports is the lens through which we look at it, but there's everything. And I thought that's what he did so well, was touch on a little bit of everything.
Go watch it.
What else you got?
If you have time, go watch the New Orleans episode. That's my favorite one.
Oh, I have to imagine.
My favorite three are New Orleans, Green Bay, and Miami. But I really love New Orleans, and there's a pretty incredible piece with Steve Gleason in there as well, that I think that you might enjoy. So yeah, if
I'm
anybody
sure.
wants to check that out, I should do that.
Nate, what else you got going on? What else you working on right now?
So I'm currently the executive director of MVP, of Merging Vets and Players, which I spoke about a little bit earlier. And so if you want to learn more about that, go to vetsandplayers.org. And in October, I wrapped on directing my first movie that was about the genesis of MVP. So it's about a Marine who was living in a homeless shelter in East Hollywood, and he meets a former NFL player, first year out of the league, living in West Hollywood. On paper, these two people have nothing in common, from skin color to, background to the way that they see the world, maybe even. But they're going through the exact same stuff. And, the struggle with the transition when the uniform comes off, and they meet each other and help each other through those struggles.
Oh, so, dude.
Hopefully
so beautiful.
Hopefully that's done in the coming months, and we get into a film festival, and it's, able to be seen either, later this fall or early next year.
Good. Awesome stuff, Nate. And Trinidad Jeans.
Yeah. Trinidad Jeans. That's right. Yeah.
You and the horse.
Me and the horse.
I love it, dude.
Yeah. Go check out Trinidad Jeans, available at Nordstrom now. But it's a denim brand that was started by a Marine. He started working on the brand when he was still on active duty. He just had a passion for jeans. He put himself through fashion school after the military when he was in his late 30s. And, I guess it's just a great example of, it's never too late to follow your dreams. And the stuff's incredible. It's all made in Los Angeles. And it's really cool.
Nate, you got so much to offer, buddy. Thank you. That was a great hour.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon, my man.
All right. Best of luck. Bye, Nate.